Okay, so today we have a ton of municipalities joining us from across the country. We have a number of Ontario people, but really representation from every province and territory, I think. We also have a number of nonprofits. So today, when I talk about municipalities, I'm not excluding you. I do think there's some interesting utility for Karto for nonprofits, and I would really like to talk about that. So if you hear me talk about municipalities, think about how else this might be useful and what else we could provide that would make it most useful for nonprofits. But before we kick it off, Jesse Donaldson, I know many of you on the call, so thank you for joining. I'm based here in Toronto. I'm Chief Strategy Officer of Help Seeker, so oversee the Strategic Services Department, which was formerly the consulting department. And why am I giving this tech demo today is because really with the rise of AI, we've accelerated our ability for our experts, social data experts to really contribute to creating tech tools. And so several of our partnership engagements we've had with some of you on the call, we're really moving towards how can we just not only answer questions for you once, but give you the tools to answer some of these systems planning questions. My background's in housing and homelessness, as is a number of people internally. So we really wanted to start with a relaunch of Karto on effective tools for housing and homelessness that really meets the current context of complexity within housing and homelessness planning, particularly the funding landscape, the resourcing landscape, et cetera. So today I'm going to show you the live tool, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of context about what this is for those of you who are newer in this journey with us. Speak for about half an hour, 25 minutes if we're lucky, and then we'll have time for questions. And we'll get you out of here in 11:45 Eastern. Okay, so what we'll cover, context and approach, how we got here. I'm going to do the live demo. I will talk about pricing and onboarding, but we're also going to send that information to you after this meeting, and then we'll do a Q&A. You guys are the first group to see it, so I'm excited for your feedback. So don't hold back. So 5 questions. We really wanted these tools to be beyond your sort of simple H&A template or beyond your simple kind of planning tool. How do we create a suite of tools? Currently there's 4, but we're going to add more that help you with some of the crunchy questions in regards to housing and homelessness planning. So the number one question, and we worked on this tool with the city of Kawartha, and I'm not sure if they're on the call, but a wealth of information about municipal housing planning, long-range financial planning. Number one question in all of this talk about deeply affordable housing, regardless of what province you are in, is can we afford this strategy? And I think there's a huge difference between what's desirable from a housing target perspective and what's affordable. And there are not enough tools to really support long-range financial planning and fiscal planning for deeply affordable housing because we know that it operates much different, of course, than that middle market housing or that market housing. So how might we answer, can we afford this housing strategy on an iterative basis? Second question, and I've partnered with multiple communities across Canada as communities. So City of Ottawa, thank you guys for joining us. Peterborough, Norfolk, City of Kawartha, as well as all of the Ontario municipalities through the AMO project, Airdrie, a number of Alberta communities on a big question of what would it take to meaningfully reduce homelessness? And we know that there's a lot we can do within the system to reduce homelessness, but at the end of the day, we need capacity. So what would it take to meaningfully reduce homelessness and how much would it cost? We really wanted a tool that would do that. Which approaches close the gap most successfully? So there's multiple different ways to answer a question when the context of systems planning and housing and homelessness is so complex right now, especially. So how might we ask what approaches close the gap most effectively? What do those cost? And what are the trade-offs between different scenarios? If we invest more in this, if we improve our performance, if we build this versus this, if we have this level of debenture versus this. So how do we build these tools that's going to allow us to ask all of these questions together in an iterative, ongoing process? Fourth, we get it all the time. How does our community compare to similar places? We are limited in some sense by the census data. It's now outdated. It was collected during COVID. However, we have found, I think, some interesting and new novel ways to use that census data that tells us updated pictures about what housing pressures are like, comparative housing pressures across the country. And also, we've set ourselves up for that when the census does start to come out next February, we have this tool and this mechanism that will be able to just load new census data in. So how does our community compare to similar places? We've been able to kind of unpack that as well. And then can we clearly explain the numbers behind our recommendations? So how do we have clear diagrams? Um, we can show the math. How do we build reports that we're able to take some of these questions that you're grappling with as housing and homelessness teams, financial teams, planning teams, take them to council, take them to senior leadership, take them to the public, and also take them to other orders of government to frankly get in line for some of this investment that's happening over the coming years. I won't belabor this one because you know this better than we do, but when people come to us asking some of these questions, the three things, the three ways they're doing it right now are spreadsheets and often a bless on the back of a really talented data analytics person, consultants, and of course we are in that pile. I'm not going to knock consultants, but often consultants give you one answer, a one-time answer to a question, rather than building that capacity for iterative investigation as your context changes. And then three, just internal estimates. So back of napkin and council wants to know ASAP why we can't do this. Well, the best we can provide is an estimate. So we wanted to provide these tools to build your capacity. And I appreciate there's a lot of senior people on the call. And so I would say this tool can be used by senior level staff with a bit of mind to data, but also really intended to build the capacity of your data and analytics team to get those answers you need faster in a way that's frankly more strategy ready, council ready. Won't belabor it, but what I like about the tools that I'll show you today is they were each born out of our partnerships with you guys who are on the call. And so I'll show you the homelessness modeling, which was really kind of a brainchild and part of City of Ottawa. Show the financial modeling, which worked closely with City of Kawartha. And then we'll also show the housing pressure index, which is a result of every single housing needs assessment we've ever done of saying, okay, but how do we compare to others? So we took all of that information and knowledge, and then we started to build our own internal tools. How do we do this internally on a more scalable and effective way? What data do we use? What pipelines, what tools? Then AI kind of slapped us all in the face, I think, several years ago. And so we've really been experimenting with how do we use AI responsibly? And there's a huge difference when there's people's lives on the line and hundreds of millions of dollars of putting something in ChatGPT and asking it to give you a calculation and then using AI to use the mathematical tools to give you accurate and responsible fiscal results. So those three together, we've really said, how do we make the most of this and then shove it to you guys as the people who are doing the work? And that's really how kind of Karto, new Karto, I think we're on life 3 of Karto is born and will be continue to be the philosophy as we move forward. Okay, 4 tools. I've kind of alluded to them, but homelessness modeling, very simply, how many people are expected to be experiencing homelessness if we do nothing? And what if we do blank? How might we blank? How might we reduce homelessness? How much would it cost? What if we change our program mix? So it allows you to ask all of those scenario planning questions. If you're in finance, that will be kind of very familiar to you, that scenario modeling. The second one is housing modeling, and I appreciate there's some great housing modeling tools out there. We're working on our own, which I think we think there's advantages to. So looking at future housing need with some updated methodologies. The third is the financial planning tool. So over a 30-year period, how much is our deeply affordable housing portfolio going to cost at a project level and at a portfolio level? And how might it change if Building Canada Homes comes in tomorrow and gives us 10 million? How might it change if we focus on rent supplements versus deeply affordable? Et cetera, et cetera. So again, those iterative what if questions. And then the final one is a housing pressure index. And it's really in a V1, I would say today, showing you how you compare to other communities, or we're going to continue to iterate on that over the coming months. It's a screenshot. We can barely see. I hope you guys can see. Okay. Of the homelessness modeling tool. So as I mentioned, projects homelessness, tests different investments, and we can compare multiple scenarios side by side to make the business case for why we're doing what we're doing. What would it take to meaningfully reduce homelessness? We've got the housing modeling tool, which I mentioned, and then the financial planning tool, which I'm going to show you shortly here. Financial planning tool really is the financial engine. And so comparing different delivery approaches, looking at a portfolio versus project level. And like I've said, can this housing strategy hold financially over time? It's fine if we can get 40 units of deeply affordable housing in the ground, but if we can't sustain that operations over a 30-year period, across our portfolio because of insurance escalation, because of debt repayment, because of the recoup on the revenue you're getting, the mix of subsidy versus not, that it's not going to work in the long term. So how might we give you that confidence that you're making a decision today that's going to last throughout the next 30 years? And then the final one is housing trends, which I'm going to show you. So with much ado, I'm going to switch to the actual demo. How am I for timing? Yeah, I'm good. We're going to start with the homelessness modeling tool. And if my colleague Dee is on the phone, I'd really want to thank Dee. And I'll tell you the lineage of how this tool. This is something we thought up after a meeting with Ottawa, City of Ottawa, over a year and a half ago. And the original prototype we built was in Excel. And so we would run one Excel per scenario. And every time our partners or we wanted to ask a new question of what if we increased performance? What if population grows faster? What if we change the program mix? We would redo the entire Excel over and over again. It became unruly and challenging. So Dee and I together created quite a large mathematical script to run some of that. The downside of that is that's not accessible for you. So this third iteration is AI enabled with a lot of guardrails on how AI is using the tools that allows you to access our same scenario modeling tool and query how might homelessness change in your system. So what we're looking at is Northbridge's workspace here. I've set it up a workspace. The reason we have multiple workspaces is because the way we've set up the accounts is you and your colleagues can see the same information. So if you want to have separate workspaces to do your own separate investigation, you're able to do that. So I'm going to click open here. And what we're looking at is two different things. So one is the setup. I've already started to set it up cooking show style so you can see it. And this is the base case. So these are the baselines that tell us if we do nothing else within our system, how many people might be experiencing homelessness in 10 years. But I'm going to start with the open input sheet. If Peterborough's on the call, Norfolk, York Region, you guys know that filling in the input sheet is kind of the most challenging part. So even though this is kind of a do-it-your-own tool, as part of our Karto package, we do have quite a bit of support at the outset to help you fill in all the data you need about your system for you to be able to run as many scenarios as you want. So we have your population projections. We can help you fill those in. Your current year experiencing homelessness, you're at risk. There's multiple ways we calculate at risk, and we'll walk you through those options. We also help you figure out what acuity mix you have in your community, whether that's through your by name list. Often communities don't have this information, or whether we use some of our placeholder data we have from other communities that would help you estimate. The reason why the acuity is so interesting is because our model not only calculates the number of people experiencing homelessness throughout 10 years and the actions related to that, but it does it by acuity level. And so what that prevents is overbuilding in one area of the system and underbuilding in the other. For example, you can't reduce your homelessness if you're not building supportive housing, addiction supportive housing, some of those high acuity supports. And the model ensures you're building proportionally across your system if you want to see that 0% or 100% reduction, excuse me. You can add programs. You can add as many programs as you want. The way we've set it up is the model's agnostic to what type of, or not type of program. You can add any type of program. So there's ways to edit this flexibly to represent your unique mix. We didn't want to create a situation where you had to have an emergency shelter, you had to have deeply affordable housing. So you can model just about any program in here and we'll teach you how to do that. You mark your capacity, what percentage goes to people experiencing homelessness versus at risk. Sorry, this text is very light for those of you who are shared screen. And then what percentage of those spaces are directed to which acuity level, what the performance of those spaces are. So how many people are negatively and positively exiting, how many you're committed to building, and other things like what's the smallest realistic build. So you're not going to build deeply affordable of 2 units. So what's the minimum you can build in a particular unit, as well as your costs. What this is simply a list of assumptions, and we're going to get you as close to a list of assumptions that feels good for your community. And that's what's most common in this kind of economic stock and flow modeling. Say, based on this assumption, if we believe these to be reasonably true, how might our system behave over the coming years? So we'll go back to Northbridge. And then what we did is said, take our input sheet, based on our system today, how many people might be experiencing homelessness. And so really you just run a new baseline here. I can rerun it while I'm talking. And what it's doing is taking all of the information you gave it about the performance of the system, your population growth, your at risk, and it's doing 2 things. It's saying based on the number of people who are inflowing into homelessness from at risk, so at risk into homelessness, and the percentage of people who are self-resolving every year, how many people might be experiencing homelessness by year 10, given the unique features of the system that you just gave it in the input sheet. So what we can see here is matrix. And so here, if in Northbridge's community, if 15% are self-resolving, they're never touching the system, and 5% of people who are at risk of homelessness are converting annually into homelessness, they will see 1,016 people if they do nothing else within their system. They don't add in their system, they don't take away. This allows you to create your baseline to run more scenarios off of. So you can choose one, or you can choose multiple. You can say, I want an optimistic scenario, a middle case, and then a pessimistic scenario. So this allows us to start saying, how might it cost to end homelessness in each of these 3? I'm going to go back though. I'm going to go to Northbridge. Here we've started the scenarios. So again, cooking show style, I've loaded them, but let's look at what types of questions you can ask out of your base scenario. So if I do nothing, I have 1,820 people who are experiencing homelessness, and I click here. These are the types of questions that this system allows you to ask. So what if we reduce homelessness by 40% by year 10? What's the best we can do? Because we know we're not going to end homelessness. What's the best we can do with 50 million over 10 years? What if we add 200 units of supportive housing in year 5? How might that change the outcome? What if we take our shelter capacity and wipe it out in year 5 and move that to prevention dollars from the Housing Stability Fund? What if we do nothing in our system, no new money, and we improve our exit rates by 15%? So, or improve our positive stays by 15%. So people are getting to the right place and they're staying in the right place. What if we completely upend our system and stop focusing on capital and instead focus on prevention? Or you can do something more complex. So a combination of all of those. So let's just do a test right now. So we'll do a test demo so you can see. We're going to do the outcome one. So create scenario. Why we wanted variance here, you can see baseline scenario variance is, again, there's multiple different ways to answer a question. So maybe your question is, I want to reduce homelessness by 30%. Maybe you want to see it just focused on prevention. Maybe you also want to compare it with improved performance. Maybe you want to compare it with more capital. So this allows you to do that iterative scenario modeling, and we'll kind of teach you and your teams on how best to do this. So new variant, let's just call it 30%. What is this? 30% reduction in homelessness. So I can do one of 2 things here. This is just me naming it. I can change the fields myself and rerun it, so I can change the inputs, or I can ask Archer. Archer is really helpful on some of the more complicated ones where you want to come up with a scenario and you're not sure how to best change the inputs. So let's ask Archer. How might I get a 30% reduction in homelessness? We're going to submit. Oops. I don't think Archer likes typos. So what it's doing, instead of like generative AI ChatGPT going back and figuring out the answer, what it's doing is it's telling me how I need to change my input fields based on its knowledge of the engine. I'm going to go ahead and apply these changes. Those are easy to make, and I'm going to rerun. Archer then in the back end, what it's doing is it's using the actual mathematical scripts to change those inputs, and then it's running optimizations. So this takes sometimes upwards of 5 minutes because it's running like thousands of different iterations to figure out what the best answer for that is. Let me show you one that we've finished running prior to this call. So we'll go into our scenario. We're back to our base case, our scenario. So we have several different variants of the same question. I want to reduce homelessness by 30%. Okay. I ran one where it was aggressive prevention. I ran one when we just did a balanced build. Here, I ran one with more affordable plus rent supplements. You can see they're all very similar regarding the number of people experiencing homelessness because my target was a 30% decrease. But you can see dramatically different differences in the cost. But you can click into these and then you can explore this variant. So now we're on the aggressive prevention. I can see the operating capital, the annual costs, how many programs were built. I can choose to edit that. I can say, you know what? I don't want any more outreach. Take that outreach out. Or I can run a new variant. What I can also do is compare. So this is all of my variants within the reduce homelessness by 30%. I can turn some of these off. I can see what the differences are. And from here, I can start to use the report generator to build my report or to build my deck. So you can see what the lowest cost is, people by year, cost by year. I have a soft spot for this tool, so I think I've spent a little bit too much time on it. I'm going to go to the next one. So again, thank you to the City of Kawartha team. Worked in detail with to try to figure out what the logic around this financial planning tool is. And I'll go through briefly. And so there's several tabs in this one, some similar principles. Here you can set your strategy targets for your deeply affordable housing strategy. And I have demo data in here, but so I'll walk you through what each tab gives us. Here tracks our portfolio delivery trajectory, our pipeline with the projects that I've got turned on. I can track units by affordability tier, and then here's some high-level costs. We do go more deeply into costs in a moment here, but I can look at my total capital cost, my cumulative city commitment over 10 years, and some of the NPV sensitivity values that are useful. So I can see here my debt service, my operating and my rent subsidy, and my cumulative. All of this is downloadable, the data and the images. But let's go to the part that I think is in some sense most useful. So this is our project tracker. You can add template projects or you can add actual in-flight projects and just change whether it's in your portfolio. So we're going to go to Birch Commons here, and I'm going to show you the info that you can edit. So in Birch Commons, you can put the unit mix, the rent, the percent of market rent, the estimated RGI rent. You can do a full pro forma, so add as much as you want on the operating costs. You can also indicate whether it's municipal owned, partner owned, nonprofit. So if you are a nonprofit and you are non-municipal, it also is useful for housing pro formas and deeply affordable. And then you can attach municipal incentives, fully customizable to you. We help you do that. We help you get those all in. Calculate the city rent contributions, bring in some revenue assumptions to build out the pro forma, and then you can assign project funding sources. And so when we help you set it up in the beginning, we can set up your funding portfolio. It's guaranteed funding and things that you might you think you might get, and then you can apply that pool of funding flexibly to your projects. And so what happens when you do that is, let's go into here, is you can start to see the profitability per project. So let's do detail. So I can look at my Birch Commons. I've got 40 units, what my capital is, what my cost per unit, what my revenue is. I can also experiment with the debenture financing. So I think this project I set at 4.83 million of loan, no debenture financing. But what happens if we were to increase that? So what happens to my debt servicing? What happens to my total operations cost? And my upfront capital, if I change these assumptions. What it also allows me to do is experiment with the mixed income cross subsidy. So at what point at current market rents, how much subsidy would be required to meet the gap between the revenue of the building and the overall operations. So again, a uniquely deeply affordable housing question that's often not available in the tools that are available to you. We also allow you to calculate the rental break even. This is all great. I know lots of you have abilities to do pro formas. So our kind of challenge to ourselves was, how do we do this not just as a project level and through the leadership of Cortha, but at a portfolio level. So this is the kind of whole investment portfolio here. There's some advanced metrics, as well as the debt schedule. But what you can then do is run scenarios. So comparing different types of projects, comparing at a portfolio level to see what is the optimal or most affordable solution. And I'll give you just one interesting comparison. So we're going to look at rent supplements, so 210 rent subs, and we're going to look at deeply affordable, 210, same amount. And you can see the 30-year operating for rent supplements is significantly more. So when we do our modeling, rent supplements are cheaper because they don't have that upfront capital. But when we apply a more sophisticated lens within the seed data, what we can actually see is the deeply affordable, the asset-based response is over the 30 years better option for this FIG community than is the rent supplement. And so we provide some of that information below. What we can also do in these scenarios is say, what if we get funding that we weren't thinking we would? So you can see I did two different ones, full city portfolio, both 1,000 units. But here I did full city portfolio plus full city portfolio with Build Canada Homes. So this says, hey, we're going to get a chunk of change from Build Canada Homes. Okay, so yes, it does lower it, but an important message and understanding for those of your colleagues around you is it's not free money. There's still commitments that financial commitments over 30 years that need to be planned for, even with a fair amount of injection from Build Canada Homes. So tracking that sort of thing and that funding in and out, I think is the real strength of this tool. We have quite a sophisticated funding pool manager, so you can see the pools of funding. You can set those to whatever you want. These are just the demo ones. You can look by source, so which projects are drawing from which source, and by project. And so if we look here, what's drawing from what, where's the gap? And again, this is demo data, so that's why it looks like that. My final one, with 3 minutes to spare, there's a lot of stuff in here, is housing trends. So our Housing Explorer. And this is our initial look at what we're doing with some of the old census data to give us new insights and new pictures, particularly as many communities are, I don't want to use the word competing for funding, but putting forth cases for investment that require an understanding of what makes your housing needs unique. This doesn't replace your local knowledge, and there's lots of data that you have locally, but for those communities who maybe have less data, this helps you perhaps investigate or tell a new story about your housing need. So I'm going to let's go through Cambridge, Ontario. So you can search for most communities in Canada, even quite small ones. If you're not on here, it means you have almost no population. We'll do Cambridge, Ontario. So across the top, what we did is we created an index. So we looked at we looked at 1,433 communities in Canada, and we clustered them based on their characteristics. So not all housing pressure is equal. And if you look at it in a myopic way, you're always going to get the Torontos, the Calgarys, the Edmontons as the highest housing pressure. But there's different types of pressure in different communities, and we wanted a way that we could articulate and tell that story, or more importantly, you could. So Cambridge is a high-cost urban pattern. They have a pressure score of 93.4, so that's quite high. 100 is the highest. Their pressure band is very high. Within the province, they're ranking about 70 to 62, related to housing pressure. But keep in mind, almost all communities have some sort of housing pressure, and then 164 nationally. So what we're looking at here is this cute little diagram. I'm gonna turn off Cambridge for a minute. So the national pressure is 50. So that's in the middle. That's where this is. On each of these axes, affordability, cost, income, supply and demand, presence of renters, and then priority populations who are in vulnerable housing situations. When I look at the pattern, the group, so that's the high cost urban pattern that Cambridge is part of, we can see that the pattern does better in far as income goes. So people in this group, communities in this group have sort of better income, but on every other axis or dimension, they have more pressure. When we look at Cambridge specifically, we can see that makes sense they're part of this group. They're roughly following the same pattern, but specific to Cambridge and what's driving up their pressure scores is this very high cost. So the cost of housing is specifically a dimension or a facet. What we've done here is you can compare where Cambridge stands out relative to similar communities, where they stand out to the province, and where they stand out nationally. The coolest thing, I think, is then we look at similar communities. So similar communities have a similar thumbprint to you. And you could look at this different ways. Those could be the people you're competing with funding for, or these are the communities that have a similar thumbprint to you, a similar population size, and you may learn something from in regards to what are they doing for housing? Where are they at in their housing and homelessness journey? How might we cross share some resources? So you can see here, Cambridge, these make total sense geographically. Guelph, Milton, Barrie, Langley, and BC. What you can also do is just select your own peer group. So if I say I don't really care about Barrie and Langley, I can pick which communities are kind of I most closely want to compare. And you can also build your own region. So I know we have regional governments on the call, so you can combine those to tell that story. If I go back to here to similar communities, what it's going to do is compare me to my similar communities along each one of these dimensions. You can actually see that relative to the similar communities, Cambridge has much better income strain. They're not scoring as highly, but as I said, that cost level is where they're really seeing pressure. I'll just do one more here. So I was a different type of community before we take questions. We'll do Amherst because I was just in Nova Scotia. So Nova Scotia, different community. So extreme, 98.5, one of the highest, 41 nationally and eighth in the province. 10,000 population. And the every index has a limitation, but what I like about this is it doesn't over favor really large urban centers. Of course, there's housing pressure there, but what other types of housing pressure are we seeing across Canada? So you can see there's here. So the pattern, high affordability or low affordability, high income pressures, and Amherst is sitting there. So really what's happening in Amherst, this tells me, is that there's significant income pressures. And so that's low income, high need pattern. And we can see some of the similar communities. So Bridgewater, New Glasgow, Queens, Smiths Falls, those are sister communities. And what might we be able to learn with that group of communities? What's cool, you can also export it, export to PDF, export to CSV. We will continue to add to this one. So this is like chapter 1. There are 20 more chapters to come on this, particularly as we get new data, especially from census next year. I'll stop sharing my screen. How are we doing over here? What did I miss in the chat? Okay, we will take questions. And I see. Oh, Jennifer, that's a great question. So Jennifer said here, to what extent can you work with chronicity and homelessness in the modeling? Yes. And I realized it was an absence of a screen. I want to add to the modeling. We use 4 levels of acuity and we use length of stay. And what you can see in the model is out of population people, when people are getting stuck, we didn't want to mix chronicity and acuity because of course they're 2 different dimensions. But I actually think acuity is more useful in this. We can see how long people are sitting in your model though, because it's a stock and flow. So if that's something that's interesting for us to surface from the back end, we could do that. What else? Questions, comments? Surely you guys have something to ask. How much? Oh yeah, I forgot, right? I'm supposed to go back. Thank you, Louise. You're saving me here. All right, go back to the rest of my thing. Live demo, here we are. Okay, so really this takes 4 weeks of onboarding. You get the tool early, it's a service agreement, it's an annual license, but our period together to make sure that we're leaving you in good faith, good place is a 4-week period to get all your data in and to make sure that it's representing the system in the ways that you want. Full team training and onboarding. Those who sign up over the next kind of couple months will have the great displeasure of working directly with me and Dee because we really want to see how people are using it so we can do that quick updates and iterative feedback. You'll have a monthly session with we'll have a monthly session with an expert, not only to talk about the tool functionality and making it work for you, but what insights are you getting out of it? What might you want to do with that information? How do you package it in a way that's relevant? As I said, there's branded export outputs. We're going to keep improving that part. I really do want it to be click of a button. And then automatic data updates. So we've built pipelines and we're going to keep feeding data into it, not to overwhelm you, but to make it as most current and useful as possible. Price is $22,000 for the year. That is inclusive of anything we push into it. So there will be more tools, there will be more data, and at minimum what's in there today, but it will be more. That includes training, onboarding, monthly sessions, support. If you're an Ontario community, thanks to partnership with OMSA or DSAB, we do have a discounted rate. So happy to talk about that. That's ending here in a couple weeks, but thank you to Aaron at OMSA for that. And then optional add-on. We lovingly call these tickets internally, and I know some of our partners here have them. These are $500 per month bundle of time where you might be using your tool and you say, hey, I found these three really good scenarios. Could you provide me with some research support to build out the case of why this is the direction we want to go, as well as build a deck and format it in our branding so I can bring it to council. So those per month tickets, 500 for a bundle of tickets, allows you to kind of access some of our services more flexibly than a huge consulting contract would be. Come to our next webinar. Rethinking how Canadian nonprofits measure and report impact. I personally am interested in that, and you can register here. On that note, what do we got for questions?
Just so you go on from Crystal Wilson. This is an interesting tool. I have a tech background. I can see how it can be helpful in the work I've done. The things we need to reduce homelessness is transparency, accountability, and building a sense of belonging and increasing hope with the people we help exit homelessness. Is there a way to factor in the effectiveness of programs to help be attain permanent housing? Sorry, I'm butchering the question here, Crystal. Attain permanent housing and help keep people housed. In my opinion, that's the work that's not being done well in my community and is causing a huge waste of resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
for it.
One of the, so in the homelessness modeling, it is one of the features you can change. And so every program has a positive or a negative exit rate. And generally, what I always say when we're working on a consulting is, I'm not going to model a poorly functioning system. That's not ethical for me to do. So I'm going to set it at 85, 75%. And that's represent that people are getting to the right places. But let's also look at what if the actual case is that your system may have some challenges, understandable. What if your supportive housing negative exit rate is actually 70% because people are not being matched in the right space or they don't have the right supports? Let's look at what that is and let's see the difference and let's have those conversations with partners about the significant impact it has when you just change some of those, even by 5 to 10% over the course of 10 years. It makes a huge difference on your overall outcomes. And I, of course, don't want this tool to be punitive, but if we're going to talk about the resources we need, we also need to talk about, as you said, the performance or the optimization of what's happening on the ground.
I think that's why we added this kind of a bit of hand holding, if you will, on setting up the tool with you guys, because like York Region, for instance, when we figured out what their portfolio was and what those exit rates were, a lot of it is if you've never asked those questions in this way, then it's a bit of a learning curve for the teams, the analytics teams and the municipality too, to make sure that they have that data from their funded partners too. So I wouldn't say it's it's just like a plug and play, right? Because you have to do some of that homework if you want the questions answered. And sometimes you'll learn that, oh man, we're not asking that questions, or we need to add this to our funding contracts. And that's okay. There's lots we can do with what we have under the hood already, but it's as much about, learning how to optimize your portfolios with somebody that's doing it across the country, like Jesse. I have another question for you here, Jesse, too.
I can see it.
Jennifer, oh, you can see
If
it?
you, yeah, if you don't want to read it, you can though.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
okay, sure, sure,
that's
sure.
you.
All right,
Um, so,
the
Built for Zero data integration. So there's no pipeline directly to Built for Zero. When I help communities decide what their at risk is and their conversion rates, et cetera, I will show you how to look at your inflow and outflow to see if those are logically aligned. It's really easy to change your input data. So when I showed you that input sheet, if you have every day new number of people experiencing homeless throughout the year that you want to update, you click that, you rerun, all of your scenarios are going to rerun. You're going to get different answers. And so, nothing automated, Jennifer, but as far as kind of friction, there's not a ton of it. It's pretty easy to update. Anyone else?
Jesse, do you want to clarify for current Cardo subscribers what their steps are to access this?
Yes, we will reach out. All of you are on slightly different timelines, contracts, etc. We will just reach out to you and let you know what the transition plan is and if there's anything kind of relevant as far as your contract goes. But it'll be Trav or myself to reach out. Okay, I think that's it, folks. I'll stay on for a couple more minutes, but those who are joining us that don't have a question, feel free to jump off. We will send you this information and a link. If you want to book a meeting with me, just 15-minute, 30, whatever you want, to go through it more slowly, really think about your data, how it's going to fit, what you have, what you don't. And I can say, okay, this part's going to work for you. This is how I would do this, just so you can start to imagine it kind of in your own context. And then we'll get helpful input for what we can improve prior to you getting it.